All right, so thank you for joining me for this session that is going to focus on the influence of the ribs and the breathing force, but also to calm the belly, the vital organs. And we're going to work in the beginning set. Right now, we'll kind of go into it. But we are going to focus on inversions today a little bit to drain the chest. Not that you have a lot of excess fluid in the chest, but to open up the lungs that way. So that's another focus in inversions. So I'll kind of show you how we'll do that with our inversions today. So let's start. We're going to sit in front of the bolster. The bolster is in a horizontal pattern. And the blocks or the bolster under your legs, either one is fine. The nice thing about the blocks is you can tilt them so that it holds the back of the legs, and then your legs can have a pattern of moving out. In fact, you might feel when you're centered here and your elbows are on your bolster that the thigh bones motion out, right? And the feet actually monitor that motion quite a bit. So once you lower back, that's not such a habit, right? It does occur that your feet fling open. So I'm going to encourage you to really use in fact, if you have the blocks, you might choose the blocks over the bolster because you can get these up on the back of the leg so that you don't have such a feature of turning out, right? So I could set my heels down, and then as I elongate that ripple effect from my ribs back, my blanket is quite high today so that my neck, right, if I touch back to the base of my neck vertebrae, that C7 is not pointing back. It's actually smooth, okay? So this whole area in the throat can soften. Place a sandbag where the ribs intersect. If you are a person who doesn't want that weight, what you might work with is having that sand lower in the belly so it can really let that space soften. So provide yourself with some sort of weight and then fidget as much as you need to get those blocks set so it feels like it's not pushing into the bone texture, right? It's interesting to work with this practice for some time because you'll start to notice these little nuances in the bones and the texture of the connective tissue. And let's separate the chest walls by motioning the arms out and the back of the arms to touch down, the hands spreading open. Notice where your belt is. And I like it if we could start with a grasp of it very wide, a generous dose of moving with your hands, sliding out on the belt without requiring yourself to pace your breath today with a certain pace or timing. The ideal pattern with breathing today is to regulate your breathing, but to bear witness to the zones of the kind of the bone zones that allow us and give us that permission to get a little more oxygen in, center the mind after that consistent breathing pattern is regulated. That's where the mind can center. Now I hold the belt with a little bit of curiosity. I'm going to stretch my hands out as far as they'll go so that I still touch the floor, right? There's not so much resistance that the floor is not felt. And you might have your elbows touching, you might have a feeling of your hands pulling. So can you have the hands still wrapping around the belt for a few more moments? And then feel the hands actually relax their grip, but keep the belt there, but not clutch onto it. And notice if there's a little more separation at the ribs. Notice if you can get the rib cage to feel like it lifts, it opens, but the content of the bones behind the ribs, that large mass of muscles. Feel if that can get kind of squishy. You really want it to center and make a commitment to feel supported. It's a big deal, right? To let this practice be a support for you. Using it as truly self-care, health-care. Now take the belt one more time, give a full grip. Lift the belt up. Hopefully you don't take a blanket up with you or other items. And the belt is over my face. I'm not going to stare at it, but noticing the feel of pulling on the belt. Inhale, arms go back. And if you can bring your hands in a little closer as we continue with this for a few. So what we're doing is holding the belt wide. I'm going to bring my hands in just a little farther out from shoulder width apart and alternate lengthening the armpits back and then moving my arms up over the collarbone straight up towards the ceiling. Feel the shoulder blades sending open. And when you're over the chest, try to move your elbows wide. A little bit odd. And then come back overhead and stretch the arms straight. Over the chest area, elbows wide. Inhale. Exhale, arms back. Reach. Now continue this for the frames of awareness where you feel the texture of breathing. You start to bear witness to your breath. Influence through the muscles. You can tell it takes practice, consistency for these muscles in the chest and the lung tissue, right, to become a little bit more supple and hydrated. So part of the practice right now for me is to keep those tissues hydrated. So I'm doing that through the pose. So last time, overhead. We'll give ourselves a few moments to just be without the belt. Okay, let go. Arms are out to the sides. I have my bolster, so it's really kind of snug, holding my chest open. If your arms are past that phase of kind of using the bolster, whatever that means, if that's an intermediate stage or not, work on the shoulder blades moving back into the bolster. You want to still have that bolster high enough to your back that you can feel the blades, the bottom tips of the blades moving down and in to the bolster. Think of the bolster almost as a kind of like a body part that you work with during your session. It creates space in the body. Now we're going to move that sand temporarily off of the body and then align your arms so that they both are as close as they could get into the bolster. I still use them to open my chest. So this is considered mountain brook pose. You shall know towards the end of the pose, if you're looking it up somewhere. But as you slide your feet in, knees pointing up, reach to the block, a block. You might have two with easy access, but you're going to lift up your rear and slide the block so it's flat under the back of your pelvis. So it could be right next to the bolster and it could be a little forward of it. So kind of navigate. So this bolster now, I like to get it pretty tighty, is basically holding me in bridge pose. Isn't it nice, right? You have the support. I would keep the block low for right now and get a feel for the tailbone moving in and then stretching the legs down. Well, that's a tricky pattern. So I'm not trying to do a full tuck of the tailbone, pelvic tilt when my legs are straight. That's rather challenging. But I am trying to work on this front lane travel of my thighs so I can open up the chest in a different pattern. This is what we do for fun. right? So consider the sand on the top of the thighs and feeling the feet separate enough so that you're not fumbling so much with you're not mentally straining to keep the toes from pivoting out. So if my heels are set apart enough, I might keep it at least parallel, if not inner, okay? Now we take the hands, we hold onto the elbows or your hands together, whichever's better for your shoulders, and then reach back over with your arms. So my arms are kind of tucked over my head. My head's tucked into my arms. And then let the experience of circulation kind of be traced here through the legs. If the back of the knees really feel like they're jutting down and extending hyperwise, have your feet a little closer. All right, so you have kind of a uni leg. That creates a little more work, doesn't it? So find what you can value still with this idea of reaching down into the heels. You know what that does? That brings the tailbone in, right? Just that idea of reaching down through the heels. Change the arm crossing. When you're overhead, reach your opposite arm over top. Feel the arms motioning back. Elongate waist. And give the body alignment some time so that it kind of delves into the tissues that are under what you viscerally see as yourself, which is, you know, the top of everything, right? The appearance of your body. So focus on the shape and then hope that it gets a little bit deeper under the skin. It could be just the hope today. Okay, now we move the hands back down. We'll keep it simplified here. Walk the feet in. Okay, we're going to do the series that works on the breathing muscles. So that was just the beginning, kind of starting to take a layer off. Now, simple, roll to left, hands off. I'm going to roll, and I'm actually going to get very close to my bolster here with my rib cage, so it's lifting. Now, you could add a blanket on the top of your bolster or a towel. I would sort out here so you have a blocker ball on the inside of the right leg for side sage. But you could, again, play with this idea of more height under the ribs. Now, I'm short, so it does make a difference in my, for me, because this will take more energy for me to get my rib motion. But the idea is also the flexibility in your spine that comes out of these things too. So what you might try is the blanket, extra or not. So if I roll down here, then my blanket down here is too low. So I've got to kind of wad that up. You know, significant wadding. Okay. Now, as I put sand on my external right side, be fairly careful on how you're kind of whipping your arm around to attain that. And if it feels like it's particular in the rib intersection where this blanket or there's a surge of awareness there, feel the arm hug in to that bolster, that left arm, because we're on the left side. And play with how would this right leg be supported with a ball or block. If you don't want to use a prop there, that's fine. Sometimes you have to fuss around to attain support. Maybe higher up on the inner leg could be useful. And then when that right arm reaches, perhaps a block goes overhead, giving ourselves enough time to get into the shape. Okay, so I teach basically with the idea that I go through into the pose with you. I know some versions are show and then people come in, but feel when you lean in where the upper arm ought to be for your support. Maybe it's down to the left hand. Maybe it's overhead. and either is fine. If your inner right thigh is kind of boggy, if the tissues, the lymph there is sensitive to the ball or block, I would notice that and try to stay with that lymph circulation. If it's kind of tender, right, we're trying to stimulate the flow of lymph. So something that has the ball with the nubs is really pretty good for that stimulation. Okay, so feel where the waist stretches. Feel where your head releases down into the blanket. Like let it burrow in a little bit so your neck can stretch. Kind of like your head tilting to one side. And imagine that sandbag is coming up to the side of your waist. And how would you breathe to receive that? So see if you can receive the breath, stretching the muscles between the ribs. And give them a little life force, the intercostals. Right arm could be over, down, it could be back. Now feeling the length, not the width right now. You're feeling side body lengthening. And any of these shapes, once you find that you feel like you're arriving in them, give them enough time that a little change happens. For instance, if you do have something on the inside of the leg, this is clearly an issue for me, but it might feel a little bit intense in the beginning, like those tissues are rather restricted and not very hydrated. Maybe the tissues are dry, that type of thing, and they're sensitive to that pressure. So they might loosen up. And loosening up might work better when we move from pose to pose, right? So we're going to go here for a few more moments, and then we're going to work on the inner thigh. Okay. You know, as you feel that right hip, the ribs, the hip, the thigh tissues down on the right leg, the left thigh is quite a player here for your back muscles, right? So it's like if you were not on your side and you were walking, right? This would be what stretches your back so that you can actually proceed forward. So start to guide your right leg, your back leg or the top leg in, okay, to the left leg. Slide off the sand, okay? And then when you come up, see if you can actually use your right hand and then turn your head down. Okay, that means you don't have to look at the screen. And then come on up, although maybe I sound like I'm mumbling in. Come on up, and let's prep for a Supta Baddha Konasana. Get all your props to the front of your mat, so towards your feet, except for your blankets and your bolster, I suppose. Just your blocks, your belt, your ball. Unroll that blanket if you were using it like that much height. And when you have your setup here, if you want more lift for your Baddha Konasana, you could have your blanket here a little bit higher. Remember, we're opening up the back of the ribs, right? The lung space in the back body. So maybe it could feel easier, but it will bring some traction there. So that's a little higher. If you want it lower, more stretch in different ways, then you can take the blankets lower. Okay, so we'll sit in front of our bolster and we'll connect the feet. So the soles of the feet are together, of course. The blocks are underneath the legs and all those good things. However, when you have your feet together, I want you to actually lean forward like you're trying to kiss your feet. So you are really going down towards them. And feel when the knees are up on those blocks, the legs are perched up high. The kind of the basket of the legs that basket weave of the back of the pelvis opens, and the legs create this kind of basin, right, for circulation. So feel the body lower down towards the feet. Now lift up and then take a belt, buckle it up, find all your pieces on that belt to connect the parts to make a wide loop. And then when that belt goes overhead around the waistband to the footland, over the tops, to the ankles, and then tighten it up. Create restrictions with the legs so that this is a pattern. Actually, it's a belt that has a traction so that it calms the nervous system. So the belt is to induce relaxation. It's that pulling, it's that pull on the skin and pressure on these points, right on the pressure point. So it's also an alignment fixture as well, right? So when you do lower back, I want you to, if you want, put sand on your feet. If you don't like sand on the ribs, you can also put a sandbag on each side. And you could put a sandbag across your rib cage. Okay, so those are the options with sand. Feet, thighs, if you have two, rib cage. I'm going to select here that my focus is sand from heart to belly. Okay, and the arms are traveling and feeling pretty easy. It's pretty easeful with my bolster this high, right? So feel the setting, the Setu Supta Baddha, play on pose names. Feel where the feet are naturally comfortable. And if this is a cozy setting for you, see if you can start to articulate and advance the subtleties. So the shoulder blades poke back into the bolster. Try to get them to poke back. There's no blanket on top, so the confusion about the props is pretty much gone. Are you pushing into a bolster? Yes, with your shoulder blades. Now, if that's challenging for you, because most of us live in a shoulder zone where we round our back at least several degrees all day long, so to push them back and try to remain there it's a doozy, right? Just to stay without clenching your jaw and efforting the whole time. So try letting the center of the heart open and feel the work of the shoulder blades. Eventually it takes care of the arm position. You don't have to do much direction with your hands or your elbows because your shoulder blades create a pattern, a platform for opening the heart. So go deeper with your breath channel. It might start opening up about now. Your rib cage, your breath, the feeling of absorption when you inhale might now be a little bit improved. Give it a few moments. Now noticing when you let go of trying to push back with your shoulder blades, if anything harmonized from the last shape that you were kind of dictating to yourself to do over and over. Sometimes you get sleepy in these shapes and you hear some instruction and it goes in and out. You know, you don't know sure if you got it when you come to, but generally there is a value, right, to hearing the patterns, coming in and out of consciousness with it, your body relates, your ears, your mind, how it's operating with these simple positions. And they're all healthful, right, for your breathing muscles, for your core chain. So final few moments here. What's up with your legs? Do they feel like there's a stretch? Do your inner thighs feel some pull? Now, if it's no pull, then I want you to reach down to your blocks, slide them out so they're just under the edge of the knees, and then feel more of the buttock on the floor. And then you might decide, well, I'm just going to move my blocks away and feel this way. And it might be particularly intense, right, in the leg position. Might feel almost a little vulnerable. So just like we did with anything that's, high lymph content, it's generally vulnerable at the skin touch. So see if you can stay with that for a few moments without the position of trying to push with your feet. Just let the knees move out. And then I'm going to reach down and unbuckle the belt, move off my sand, and grab a ball or a block. If you don't have one, don't worry. Okay. Lift up the knees, keep the spine reclining. Scoot your seat about enough of a scooch where you feel that you could sway your knees side to side. You just don't want to be so confined to your bolster with your tailbone. And then I'm going to encourage you to put your ball in the very upper outer left thigh or the block or a wadded towel, right? You could use a couple different props or a Nerf ball. Okay, it would probably be pretty good. You want to go scramble around and get one. Right foot to left knee, cross the right foot to that leg and push the ball in a little bit with your bicep muscle, right? So you're kind of pushing in, bicepping. And then lean into that ball. You can stop bicepping if you want by now, but feeling how high you can get that ball. If you have a ball, it's good to get one. They're great massage tools. I'm doing a couple chair yoga actually with my mom working with just the ball. Okay, so when you lean into that ball or block, that's what you have, hold the right knee and see if you can actually hold the knee and feel it resist away from you, just a little bit. So the drive is not, I'm going to pull this leg and feel more pain. I'm just going to hold the knee and let it push a little bit away from my hand towards the front space. So feel that pressure on the ball and almost try to squish it. Squish the ball. Now my leg is naturally going farther over because I'm trying to squish the ball. So move the tailbone downwards, right? So you have a little bit of this, I'm going to let my back of my pelvis lengthen. It's a lot of very subtle pelvic floor work. So subtle, like it would be even in a room where we're instructing it, it would be so personal that it would be hard to see all the details. So you want to find the experience of holding that knee, pushing it into the hand, leaning into the ball. Not much left over to keep attempting to do. Except lower the left hand, bring the knees back in center. Feel the right knee move away. Circle the right foot just for circles. Go both directions, right foot. Okay, now when you switch sides, you might put that right leg down and kind of shake it out. Just had some work with it. Wiggle it around. Shift sides, left foot to right knee, cross it, ball to right hip. And if you move out of it and you feel almost no quick response in the joint, that's a good sign. The recovery is possible. That's part of that, is recovery, right, with the tissues. They feel vulnerable in the pose, but when you come out, you recover. So lean into that ball with that right leg. I've got my ball, so it's on the very upper outer thigh. It's the greater trochanter. It's that bump right at the top of the thigh where it meets in towards the pelvis, but sometimes it doesn't work for everybody to be right at these points of reference. Working with movement as well as anatomy, right? So you've got to adjust to your needs. Yeah, knead the ball, push into it, hold onto the left knee with the right hand. Start to feel coordinated a little bit, like, oh yeah, I got my hand holding my knee, I know how to do this. I push my knee into my hand. Left hand could be anywhere, relaxing. Could be stretching back besides your head. And kind of feel the total range of the core body. Or the pore body, P-O-R-E. The pores. Kind of feel into the pores. All right, so where the body leans into that ball, can you move the knee into the hand? Try that. Try to get a feel for your hip. I know it might be too much to add that instruction for your pose. So keep it simple. Simple insights. Now when I let go of the knee and I start to gather my ball closer up to the outer right thigh, so it's a little higher up, my left knee moves open, I'm back into kind of the first phase of getting into the shape. And then we coordinate pushing that left foot down, uncross, roll to your right hip side sage, okay? So let's turn. And what you might practice here, since this is, it's kind of like mermaid pose, isn't it? It's like you have the position of the legs into that zone. So you want to turn your bolster, right? I used my blanket on top. I'll repeat, especially since it's the other rib cage, which likely has differences in the back, not the ribs. That we generally have pretty equalized unless there's a, you know, an issue, right? An actual injury that will change things, obviously, but in the ribs or the breathing muscles or the lungs. But we're working on enabling those tissues to even out. So I'm going to push and lean. And I know I have a ways to go, right, to get it all set up. So what I want you to focus on is that you're on your right side. Your arm is between the bolster and the blanket, or blankets if you're using two. And then you let that left arm stretch either over, maybe you have a block under your hand, okay? Or your arm is down, okay? Now, or behind you. Knees need to feel supported, right? So if this ball works okay on the inside thigh, maybe this inner thigh is less irritable, right, with the ball. It's interesting to notice these things on the lymph. So you might lower the ball down to the knee. Maybe the knee is different on the second side. So work to the position where you're in your side, laying on the bolster, okay, basics. And you have the waist reaching. Yeah, and you can use the props to do all the work, right? Use them to kind of support you, balance you, elevate the inner environment, right? And feel when you kind of go into that elevation, it's like your ribs got in an elevator, they went up a floor, and now you're going to sustain that for some time, okay? So let the arms be not too radical where they're comfortable. And take some cautions here around knees, right? You want to notice, well, if I need some cushion under my knee or do less bending in my knee, that's okay. Right, we all find that working the front of the thigh tissue is usually important, right? It's certainly not a very supple place for most people, the front of the leg, the hip flexors, right up into the psoas. So we are prepping. Our next pose is we're trying to lift the diaphragm up off of the, up away from the abdomen to cool off our lungs. That's our next set. So I want you to be able to let that side lengthen, keep it real simple. The diaphragm doesn't have to be a trigger right now, but where the arm reaches gives you that detail. If it hurts to move your shoulder this way, don't do it, right? Arm could be down or behind you. Okay, give a few more moments. If you roll on the back of your head, gives you a little more flexibility in your spine. Any of these things we can kind of wrestle through will likely contribute to benefiting the breath pace, but also the length of the exhales to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Right, so less inflammation in the body. Give a few more moments. Find where your neck is comfortable, not having to crane to look towards the screen.